Right. So what I try to illustrate now is it can look in different ways. You can personalize it, customize it however you want. The specifics are irrelevant. It has to make sense to you the way you're writing it down, especially any like symbols that you're using. There's no standardization of what they need to be because that's, symbols in logic always just arbitrary. Use whatever makes sense to you intuitively. Just the general idea is, so you have a page and somebody starts speaking. And there are two basic kinds of situations that could exist. One of them is just going to be an isolated speech. It's just one person talking, and so just focusing on that, and then you will probably have a response to it. Or it could be, doesn't have to be in real life, a person that you will be able to respond to. You can just try for yourself to come up with how you would have responded. That's like an exercise that you can do. And so in that case, probably all you need to do is to create two columns. Usually you can start with like you can write just for your organization OCD purposes, like what it is that you're responding to. And in this case, would be like in the left column would be the arguments of the person that you are trying to write down, take notes. And on the right, you're leaving yourself space for critique. And the importance of like writing it like this will become obvious very quickly, because what you of course have to do is like the easiest thing is chronologically from top to bottom you're writing down the things as the person is saying them. But it's important to understand it's not important to write down every single thing the person said. That would just overwhelm you with just constantly writing without the ability to think while you're writing. And so what you're writing down is bullet points. And the bullet points, important things like of which, the bullet points of the arguments that the person is making. That's an important distinction. Not of the sentences or all the words and stuff that the person is saying, but only unique, distinct, logical points that they've made. It can happen that like a person can like say an argument A, let's say, and then what they do for the next 10 minutes is they just keep repeating A. They just like in different ways are saying the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. You don't have to write it 15 times if they said it 15 times. You have to only write it down once because it's just one idea. And you can make a note that they said it 15 times. Like that, because that's a point of information that you can sort of give feedback on. Like maybe try to have multiple different points and not repeat the same point 15 times. So then they can have like a fundamental different argument B and a fundamental different argument C. What's important is I'm leaving room here, because it may happen very easily that they will be going back and forth like between points, because they don't have to be like fully 100% structured and organized. So when they say like something like A, and then they immediately start saying, so they say like A, and they immediately start talking about B, and they talk for a while about B, but then they add something to A. Then I can add it here, even though chronologically it happened later. Just important is that I have to have a list in order of their general points that they've made, and then I need to have space to add anything that they at any other point would have added to it, just to be clustered in the like all the things that have been said in relation to the same point need to be said, need to be written down close to the general introduction of the point. The reason for that is then when you're trying to do critiques, and if this was multiple speeches, it wasn't just like a one speech and then just whatever you come up with to respond to it. But if this was like a first speaker in a debate, and then there was let's say, because like A is affirmative, O is opposition. And if it was like later and doesn't have to be super structured or call these things, this is just to get an idea that in most debates you have switching sides. So it's like a first speaker from one side, then first speaker for the other side. Then maybe it's the same speakers just having alternating speeches, or it could be a team. It could be like a first, second, and third person on the panel who are defending the same position, and they're just having like alternating speeches against their, like it's like their speech and then their opponent's speech and then speech and their opponent's speech, and so it sort of keeps switching. That's a general structure. So in this case, the next speaker, the person who's responding, or it could be, again, this is column for your critique. So the person who's responding could have like a specific response to the argument A. So in this case, like when it's something is an opposition, like it's actually a counter, then my symbol that I use is just a cross. So I would just like write something like cross A. And the reason, if you write it like this, what you can do is you can connect them. This is technically a flowchart. If you had multiple alternating arguments and you would write it just like one column next to each other from left to right, then you can track the whole like evolution of the debate of the points and counterpoints throughout the whole the whole interchange, the whole debate. You could say, for instance, that the person then could have like introduced like their own argument and then like their own next argument, and they may or may not have any connection with any of the things that have been said previously. So if they do have a connection, then you can connect them and create some sort of symbol, like maybe I don't understand exactly what was the point of that, but they said it's a response. Or like I said, maybe like here it's like maybe the response to what they said was saying something against it, therefore it's a counter argument. Or maybe if you have like 2 points, maybe they introduced another one, and if you have these points, then maybe you find out that it's like essentially the same argument, which may or may not make sense. Like you may actually find out that there are things that they agree on. And so this is like the general principles of the argumentation flowchart that if I had to sum up, so you write a column for each speech of a speaker. You generally organize them from left to right, the columns. And you write not everything that the person said, you just write the important points, the distinct, unique, logical points that they've made, arguments, like they're separate arguments that they've made. You leave a room between the different arguments unique there as they appear, even though you write the new appearances chronologically from top to bottom, because they can return to a point later on in the speech. So you need to leave some space to group all of the things said in connection to the same argument at the same place. And then when you have a response speech or you're preparing a response, then you can write down arguments in the right column, and or your own or of the response speaker. And then you see, did they just bring up unrelated points of their own that are in no way connected? Or did they specifically respond to any of the points that the previous speaker has made? If yes, like, do I actually understand the nature of that response? Was it agreeing with them? Was it a counter argument? And if it was a counter argument, then in the notes you don't have to just write down like what you believe what it is that they said. You can also make notes of how to respond to it next to it. So you can also write down what you're critically thinking about it at the moment. It's just a pro tip. I sometimes, when I was starting as a debater, I just like wrote down like something like, this is silly. But the problem is when you're looking back at it, I didn't understand why I thought it was silly or what exactly I meant by it. So your notes of what you're thinking in the moment need to be specific enough for you if you look at it later to know exactly what you meant. So, but still, it's important to also be able to write down not just what they said, but also grouped with next to the point as they made it, as you wrote it down. You can write down what you thought about it, like why it's good idea, bad, but especially like why it's a bad, faulty idea, or what's the problem with the idea, because sort of it should give you hints on like maybe this is your response forming, like what you would have responded or feedback you would have given. Because of course you don't have to do it to argue with the person in any way. You can do it as like a judge or like a person just to give feedback. So you can just have people try to debate an idea and do this sort of adjudication, because that's what it is if you're doing it as a neutral third-party observer. And then you just can give them if it doesn't have to be like you won, you lost, but it can be just generally feedback. If, for instance, like a manager and some of your team are debating something, then you can sort of have these sort of neutral notes and then objectively give feedback to both parties or all parties. It doesn't have to be just two parties, based on these notes that you've made. And then just you need to give yourself, after the whole speech or debate is over, you need to give yourself, let's say 20 minutes at least to look over your notes. And you can even, depending on if you feel you need it or not, you can then just like write down your feedback as like a series of bullet points. Like these are the things that I'm going to tell them based on these notes of mine. And if they have a specific question of like why I thought or what I thought about anything, you can then use these notes as your reference.